Hello and welcome to the world of Fate Dreams End, a Type Moon-inspired Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game set in an alternate universe version of Fate Stay Night, 1 year following the ambiguously described events of the 5th Fuyuki Holy Grail War. Our group's been streaming our game for nearly a year at the time of this recording and logged over 100 hours of playtime. So in the interest of making it easier for the players to remember important plot points, and to give anyone interested in watching us a much easier jumping on point, this video will recap the events of the first 41 sessions. If you'd like to watch new sessions as they happen, look up Playful Mimic on Twitch and keep an eye on this channel, on YouTube, for postings within a few days of each session. Before we dive into the story itself, here's a brief background on the setting and the two main characters for the first few story arcs. I'll add additional player character information as they join the game. The year is 2005. 1 year ago, the Japanese city of Fuyuki suffered a series of freak occurrences in which large portions of the city disappeared. The official line was gas explosions, but Mage Society paying attention to the area know that this is a pretty standard cover-up for supernatural activity gone wrong, especially given the Great Fire from a decade ago. It was known in some circles that a Holy Grail War ritual was to take place, but none of the people sent by Clock Tower returned, and no one seems to know if there was even a winner, much less what they wished for if it was granted. Instead, our story opens in Europe and predominantly follows two mages working through their own challenges as phantasmal species. As a recap, phantasmal species are creatures like elves or halflings that exist in the world of Type Moon, who stay out of sight for the general human populace to avoid conflict with the Secretive Mages Association, the Fanatical Holy Church, and the Harvester faction of supernatural creature-hunting opportunists. Annis Greenleaf is a half-elf druid from Sherwood Forest, a hidden phantasmal species community in England. Prior to the start of our game, Annis moved to London to take over her ailing grandfather's potion shop. She possesses an incredible talent for brewing potion mystic codes, which she provides to mage aristocrats and Clock Tower personnel in exchange for patronage and a degree of protection from the Mages Association. Her clients include the Edelfelt family of well-off mages, many officials of Clock Tower, and a mysterious figure in Germany who requires a special potion each year. When this unknown client fails to request their regular potion, Annis left her cousins in charge of the London shop and set off to Germany to deliver the potion herself, and perhaps learn something about this mysterious client. Penelope is a halfling bard known across Europe as a successful singer and musician. Unlike most phantasmal species, Penelope often performs with her pointed ears in full view, which combined with her halfling height of 4 feet leads the general public to believe she's an eccentric character doubling down for publicity rather than an actual supernatural creature. Penelope learned her early bardic magecraft from her halfling mentor Vivi, though her true talents were developed under a very special tutor in tune with the fey nature of the College of Glamour. Prior to the events of the story, Penelope went on a long musical tour. It is now set to rendezvous with her manager, Jameson Wilgen, in northern Germany. The Germany arc of our story opens with Annis and Penelope separately and unknowingly traveling on the same train with a group of harvesters who are hunting down a spider-like phantasmal species known as a Jorogumo. Harvesters are a loosely organized faction of humans who hunt down and capture or kill phantasmal species to leverage their unique physiologies for use in spells, potions, or whatever their clients want. After meeting one another and discerning their natures, Annis and Penelope decide to team up and get to the bottom of what these harvesters are up to. It turns out that Jorogumo is not a spider monster, but instead a friendly Jorogumo-descended artificer who leverages his natural talents to weave mana into spider silk and create mystic codes, including a large golem that the group decided to playfully name Raps. The Phantasmal Species group defeats the Harvesters through a combination of misdirection, mind control, and direct combat, leaving them alive at one of the train stops along the way. Having resolved the immediate danger, the group exchange stories and it becomes clear that Kwaku, the artificer, is in transit to the Einsburn mage family's castle, which seems to line up with Annis's client destination. In order to avoid the expected harvester reinforcements at her original destination, Penelope opts to join the two and they disembarked for the castle together. While staying at a surprisingly cowboy-themed hotel just outside the bounded field of the Ainsburn Castle, the group hears stories of ghosts and unusually persistent cold weather. They also meet a Mages Association necromancer named Crosby, whose mage name is the Bone Settler, and Crosby informs them that he's actually here to resolve the ghost issue before Clock Tower sends a cleanup team, and all of these people suffer the consequences of the association's need for absolute secrecy on the subject of magical and phantasmal entities. Crosby thinks the ghosts are a result of the Ainsburn bounded field around their haunted forest failing, and requests the group, who actually have an invitation of sorts due to the potion delivery, to take care of the issue while he handles the ghosts. The night before they set out for the castle, an Ainsburn ghost beseeches the group for assistance as well, providing them with the tools they need to access the forest. Upon entering the forest, the group encounter a number of minor elementals surrounding several statues that serve as critical components for the Ainsburn bounded field network. After dispatching the elementals, the group encounters a small black bird that Annis convinces to act as their guide to the castle. Once they pass through the Bane secrecy barrier, they discover the forest itself is drained of mana, and see a giant red tree growing out of the Ainsburn castle in the distance. Some of the less drained trees in the forest attack the group as well, which combined with the elementals does not bode well for the Ainsburn family. The bird leads the group to a gorge filled with countless bodies of dead Ainsburn homunculi and one very aggressive skeletal beast. After dispatching the creature, the ghost from back at the White Witch Saloon leads the group to a cabin higher up the mountain, where one of the remaining Ainsburn homunculi has been waiting for them. The homunculus looks much older than the more homogeneous ghosts, which all look about the same as one would expect if you're looking at it from a meta sense. She introduces herself as Okoviel von Ainsburn, and shares that the Ainsburn castle was overrun by a powerful druid whose elemental and plant blight army overtook their defenses and killed the other Ainsburn homunculi throughout the region. The druid himself then killed the Ainsburn golem Jubstashite von Ainsburn, the current leader of the family. Having accomplished his apparent goal, the man then dropped a seed in the castle courtyard that instantly grew to a large tree that he left through using a Magecraft ability to teleport via trees. The tree, identified as a Child of Ainnash dead apostle descendant, tapped into the ley lines and began to drain the forest dry of mana. Okoviel only avoided the fighting herself because her longevity potion orders to Annis were disrupted and she was in no condition to fight. After providing Okoviel with the necessary potion to keep her alive, Annis devises a plan to redirect the ley lines feeding the tree to instead reinforce the bounded field around the region and seal the ghosts and other creatures in. The group travels to another keystone statue and redirects the ley line, though not before calling out to all the phantasmal species in the region to help them fight the tree. The group travels to the second of 3 remaining ley lines, feeding the tree and redirect the energy to return some life to the very fragile ecosystem before the ecosystem collapses under the weight of the Child of Ainnash. The final ley line hub falls behind the castle, leading the group to travel around it and through a long abandoned village to a ritual site with elevated stones in the center of it. While performing the ley line redirection ritual, Annis and Penelope both have visions from the past events of this region. Annis sees the original human Ainsburn researcher whose accident in a suspiciously advanced for its time period lab created the Justiz Lieserich von Eisburn homunculi that achieved the 3rd magic of Heaven's Feel. She also sees that this woman was supernaturally manipulated into a one-night stand with a man she wasn't interested in that resulted in the conception of a child that would later grow very sick. Driven to extremes to achieve Heaven's Feel faster than Justice could manage, the Ainsburns sacrificed the entire village without any success, and the woman's child passed away before Justice could finish the spell. Many of the Ainsburns lost themselves in guilt and despair, leaving the castle or even killing themselves, till the only remaining Ainsburn researchers were the Morning Researcher herself, the homunculus Justice, and the castle caretaker golem Jubstashite. Annis doesn't see what becomes of them, but she does know that the Heaven's Feel spell was still being cast when she left the vision. Penelope saw a young Ainsburn homunculus girl left to the wolves atop the stones in the ritual site. relying on her incredibly powerful familiar, Hercules, to protect her from the wolves of the forest. The familiar's animation clearly caused the child great pain, no doubt the strain of maintaining such a powerful familiar. But over the course of time, the girl grew from hating the familiar to tolerating the pain and relying on him. Penelope discovers that the golem Jubstashite is the architect of the situation, and that Ecovial, her modern ally, was meant to be spare parts should anything happen to the girl. Following the completion of the Leyline redirection spell, the group decides to rest and gather strength before facing the vampiric tree at dawn. During breakfast, the bird that has acted as their guide grabs a doll buried within the stone ritual site and carries it off to the castle, apparently releasing a shade of the familiar from Penelope's vision in the process. The party enters the castle through the damaged and overrun front gates and enters combat with the now Leyline-deprived tree. Through a combination of their own resources, a few flammable barrels and explosives found in the ruined castle entrance, and the angered shade of the heroic spirit, the group defeats the dead apostle's spawn tree. The group finds an incredibly mana-rich root within the base of the tree, which they set aside for later, and discover that the body of the golem Jubstashite is missing its critical golem core necessary to revive him. While exploring the castle for survivors and other resources to get things moving again, the group comes across a library containing information on how to restore the golem should they wish to do so. They also find information on what the family's been up to, including a visitor's log showing that one of Ainash's other clients, Lavisa Edelfelt, had visited the castle in recent months. Their other investigations of the area showed that a ritual involving mistletoe was used on the roof of the castle at some point, which they determined to have likely been a casting of Dispel magic, and that the missing golem core was actually recovered by the bird, which means that the group has what they need to rebuild the golem. The group also discovers a garden possessing a number of previously thought to be extinct plants, apparently surviving here due to the mana strength of the ley lines, which Ainash's collects seeds from and ships to her druid circle back in Sherwood to hopefully recover these lost species. After dispatching some leftover elementals, the group settles in to enjoy an actual meal in the castle kitchens. During this meal, the subject of the third magic in the Einspurn goal of Heaven Feel comes up. The idea that the world can be saved by separating the souls of every living creature from their body does not set well with Ainash's Penelope or Kwaku, and they secretly conspire to help recover the golem, but perhaps adjust him such that he is open to new ideas rather than repeating the same failed process from the past 1,000 years. They also seed Ecovial with new independent thoughts to hopefully break this cycle, as the Einspurns have caused a great deal of harm while seemingly learning nothing from their mistakes. The meal also touches on the Fuyuki Holy Grail War ritual, which involves 7 mage masters commanding 7 familiars in a battle royale whose survivors are granted a wish from the Holy Grail. During this discussion, Ainash's reveals that, were she granted a wish, she would like to see technology rolled back to levels more sustainable with the environment, which leaves Penelope feeling a bit uneasy. The following morning, Kwaku somehow receives an invitation to an upcoming event in Paris, France. It seems the current generation's Arsène Lupin, a gentleman thief mage presumably descended from the iconic figure of literature, is going into retirement and will be returning many of the things he's stolen over his career to their rightful owners. Evidently, along the way he acquired a wedding kimono meant for Kwaku's long-deceased mother, and Kwaku has an opportunity to attend this event and recover it. Unfortunately, Kwaku has started work on building a somewhat different Jubstashite golem, and would not be able to attend. Ainash's and Penelope volunteer to go in his stead. Prior to leaving the castle, Ecovial takes the group down to the treasury and compensates them for their assistance in recovering the castle and working to restore the golem. In addition to wealth, the group finds a contract from the Atlas Institute of High-Tech Magecraft Alchemy that explains where the advanced homunculi vats came from. They also find a copy of the full Holy Grail War ritual, including caveats in the summoning spell that could be used to modify specifically summon servant classes beyond the 7 default options. When the group finally leaves the castle, they find a large-scale battle took place outside the walls during their fight with the tree. It seems a werewolf who caught their call for help led a number of wolves to hold off the Child of Ainash's reinforcements during the fight. The werewolf nods to the group as they leave. Ainash's and Penelope return to the saloon in time to inform Crosby they've dealt with the ghost problem and that a Clock Tower Scorched Earth team would not need to be deployed. Crosby informs them that the bird they've been following around is actually a Nasuverse, which is a type of psychopomp phantasmal bird species whose songs can entrance the living and bring peace to the dead. They also find Penelope's manager Jameson has traveled to the area to help bring them back to civilization. They spend the day going to a nearby German town for some much-needed rest and shopping, during which trip they find a bookstore that caters to mages. After picking up several books and a scroll that would allow Annis to bind the bird as a familiar, Annis names the bird Hemlock, and the group splits up to take care of their own business. Annis spends her downtime growing plants and making potions, using the newly found, previously thought extinct herbs, while Penelope returns to her flat in England and sees some of her professional obligations are taken care of, as was her original goal. Penelope returns to the castle on the day of the next full moon. She sees that Annis has settled in, Kwaku is making some progress on the golem, and Hemlock now has a mask that allows him to tap into his Nasuverse nature. That night, Penelope uses the ritual grotto within the castle to summon her bardic teacher, who until this point she believed may have been a water elemental or knowledge spirit. Thanks to reading some of the books in the Ainsburn library, Penelope pieces together that her teacher is actually Vivienne, the Lady of the Lake from Arthurian mythology. Vivienne shares with her that the reverse side of the world, which is the plane where most of the phantasmal species and divine spirits went when humanity took over the world following the Age of Gods, is seeing a loss of mana similar to what Penelope experienced in the forest, and, it turns out, seems to be going on in the Fuyuki area as well. Vivienne says that she's going to have more of her agents look into these issues on her side and ask Penelope to check in again next month. Following this, Annis and Penelope wrap up their immediate business in Germany and travel to Paris for the Arsène Lupin event. Prior to arriving in Paris, Penelope and Jameson negotiated with Lupin's representative to allow her to perform at the event, which nets her an additional invitation on top of the one provided to Kwaku. She's also to be given an opportunity to speak with Lupin in advance, which she hopes to find out more about what's going on, and early access to the event to give a bit of an edge in understanding where things are going and how they're going to get there. When Annis and Penelope arrive in Paris, they check into a hotel room provided by Lupin. Once they're settled in, Penelope goes for a walk and comes across a group of harvesters attempting to abduct a halfling. She calls Annis for backup, and the two of them interfere with the abduction. The two harvesters from the train are present and attempt to get their revenge, but the group gets the better of them when Annis downs a potion that turns her into a beefy strong woman. Hemlock's song hinders the harvesters, and Penelope once again charms one of them into a temporary ally. During the fight, a half-elf monk named Darek Jonas gets pulled into the conflict as a stray bullet passes through his limousine on a nearby street. Darek, who it turns out is actually pronounced Derek, is a would-be American vigilante, and he helps the group safely disable the harvesters and provide an escape path for the halfling, who it himself turns out to only be in Paris because a mage teleported into his farm by mistake and accidentally left behind a jacket containing an invitation to the event. It turns out Derek is staying in the same hotel and attending the Lupin event as well. He also seems to be a bit smitten with the still enchanted with muscles Annis, who he sees to be a stronger and more experienced vigilante hero. She slips their room number to Derek, who in turn slips her a key to his room on the top floor suite, although he slips it to her via the window, making it clear that Derek is capable of running along the side of a building, and maybe living up to his vigilante reputation after all. While Penelope and Jameson settle in and get to know the halfling they rescued, Annis decides to go for a walk that takes her to Derek's room, where she spends the night without checking in with Penelope. Given Penelope had just encountered harvesters, Annis not coming back or answering her newly gifted phone upsets her, and they have a bit of a fight the following morning when they meet up again. Following that conflict, they enter the magic shop above a cafe where Penelope was set to meet Arsène Lupin VII later in the day, and encounter an Atlas mage named Catherine, who seems to also be going to the Lupin event and was trying to gather information on other customers to get an idea of who else she can expect to find there. Catherine recognizes Penelope as a subversive musician who irritates the old guard of the mage world, and agrees to lend her mechanical drones to Penelope for use in her show at the Lupin event. Catherine also confirms that the invitation in the coat that the halfling was trying to return is for a clock tower policies mage by the name of Richard Wainwright, who apparently has been trying to use his office to pressure other mages into letting him into the Lupin event after claiming his invitation was stolen by a halfling. Later in the day, Annis and Penelope return to the cafe for the meeting with Lupin. But something seems awry. It turns out all the people in the cafe are the same people they'd seen on their prior visit, doing the same things, and going through the same behavior loops with only minor variations from the staff to take orders. Through some deduction, they determine that one of the women in the cafe is actually acting as a puppet for Lupin, who himself is trying to find out what happened here and why, given he owns this cafe, and the spell that could cause this loop to persist is sufficiently powerful that he's having trouble determining why someone would go through this much effort to achieve effectively nothing. The spell is ultimately disrupted, and the patrons, apparently aware of what they were doing but unable to do anything about it, all panic and flee the building. Clock Tower will be by later to cover up the incident. The group doesn't know it yet, but it'll later be discovered that this was the result of someone using a chaotic mystic code that amplifies a spell at the cost of control, resulting in an attempt to enspell one of the clerks at the magic shop upstairs, instead enspelling everyone in the cafe downstairs. Annis and Penelope later bid adieu to the halfling, agreeing to deliver the coat and invitation to the rude mage who forgot them. Penelope gets a cab to take him home, paying the driver well to ensure he gets there and also to keep him safe. Having stayed out looking for Annis the night before, and in anticipation of the upcoming long night of the Lupin event, Penelope decides to get some rest while Annis goes shopping for helpful items. She finds a less than reputable Chinese food restaurant that doubles as a harvester storefront and trades a number of potions for an oversized bag of holding. Annis is uncomfortable when she finds a locket with a picture of a Goliath woman among the previous owner's belongings inside of it. An hour earlier than the invitation was expected to activate, Penelope's specially negotiated advanced invitation creates an illusion of a white rabbit that only she can see. She leads Annis and Jameson on a chase through the city, ultimately bringing them to Lupin's estate, which it turns out is a magnificent mansion overlaying a more mundane mansion, and that people can only enter the true mansion if they are labeled with an invitation or designated as a +1. It turns out the mage Richard Wainwright was actually following them through the city, but he still can't get in without an invitation. Richard proves quite rude to Penelope, carrying resentment to halflings and only interacting with Annis since he doesn't seem to notice that she's not human. This prompts the group to use Richard's invitation on Jameson, who could have already gotten in as a +1, and in doing so cutting Richard off from the event. In order to keep him from pressuring other guests as they arrive, Annis and Penelope send him to that Chinese restaurant run by harvesters instead, which gets rid of him for about an hour. Inside the mansion, they meet up with Lupin and learn about the mystic code impacting the cafe described earlier. They get a quick tour of the many rooms featuring Lupin's stolen items. They run into Crosby the Bone Settler again, who's there on work, and learn that there will be contests of sorts to determine who gets which items, as Lupin can't actually tell who rightfully gets what. Once the proper start time kicks in for the other invitations, Annis and Penelope head to the main entrance area and watch the guests arrive. Beyond the ones they already knew were coming, they meet a wide range of characters, including an elven woman named Nora, who Annis knows from Sherwood. Nora informs Annis that there's going to be a gathering of elves and druids at a summit in a week's time, and encourages her to attend, as the topic will be the state of the world in light of the Fuyuki incident and ensuing mana drainage. Other standout guests include a disguised dragonborn from the Wandering Sea, a mysterious and intense mage woman named Lucretia, and a perpetually drunk and disheveled man named Jimmy. They also meet a pair of mercenaries that they recognize from when the harvesters would have gotten train reinforcements back in Germany, a tiefling musician named Johnny reminiscent of a certain popular song, a number of mage nobles, and the Goliath woman whose photo was in the locket that Annis found in her used bag of holding. Richard also returns from the restaurant just before the deadline, and following some negotiations and soul-searching, Annis and Penelope allow him into the party as a +1, and agree to help him recover the items stolen from Clock Tower, so long as he keeps a more open mind when it comes to phantasmal species. The main conceit of Lupin's party is that attendees are all people or representatives of people who are the rightful owners of something he or one of his predecessors has stolen. Given he doesn't know who each item actually goes to, he's created coins representing each of them and distributed them randomly among the invitation-holding attendees. As there are more items than attendees, he's also set up games with additional coins as prizes. Violence is forbidden within the mansion, to be punished by contracted Holy Church personnel, but otherwise everyone is welcome to barter, steal, gamble, or otherwise do whatever they wish to acquire one another's coins. There's no sneaking out early, as the coins are not exchanged for the actual prizes until just before dawn. Over the course of the night, the party try their hands at a number of games. They successfully gain several items, including the kimono that they set out for, and set about learning what everyone at the event has and what they want. As they gain items from the games, they seek out the intended owners and trade things around, ultimately aiming to get everyone exactly what they're here for in hopes of minimizing conflict while building some positive PR for phantasmal species in the process. One of the games in particular stands out as especially strange. A maze in the basement that is shrouded in complete darkness that seems to consume light and counterspell any attempt to create supernatural light. Upon touching any surface of the maze but the floor within the maze itself, the participant is teleported into the air above a giant sandpit, allowing them to fall harmlessly, but not comfortably, into a public space for the amusement of others. The noblewoman Lucretia has organized a group to brute force this maze, making notes of their progress by step counts and directions, but she fears there won't be sufficient time to complete it before dawn. Annis and Nora ultimately solve the maze through druidic wild shaping into a bat that doesn't need to see to navigate the maze. With very few exceptions, nearly everyone ends up with the item that they were looking for before the halfway point in the night where Penelope is set to perform. The group even has a few extra items from Lupin's highest honors collection, which don't seem to have known owners yet. It turns out the bardic performance is yet another game for Arsène Lupin VII. Penelope and Johnny face off in a music duel, which has mandatory attendance among anyone carrying coins lest their coins disappear. Johnny puts up a good contest, but just can't compete with Penelope's star power, especially given the aid of Catherine's drone mystic codes and the general support won from matching people with their missing items. Penelope handily wins the contest and gains a coin corresponding to a golden fiddle, which confirms Johnny's identity. The victory is short-lived, however, as a mysterious smoke fills the room and knocks most of the attendees unconscious, even the ones who are normally immune to magical sleep. Hemlock notices a few figures moving within the cloud, then the floor implodes and everyone falls through and into the maze below, which then in turn teleports them above the sandpit. No one is hurt by the incident, but Nora discovers her coin corresponding to an arrow was stolen in the confusion. After verifying everyone is okay, Annis and Penelope put together a bit of a detective party with Derek and Catherine. They do a full investigation, sneaking around the previously blocked third floor, interviewing the Holy Church staff as well as other guests, and ultimately gathering information as to who did this and why. Given none of the guests lost a coin that they were expressly looking for, it seems unlikely that anyone was going to force the issue, but the group nonetheless persists if only for their own peace of mind. Through their investigation, the team discovered that the vaults containing the actual items, not the illusions on display below, were compromised at the same time as the floor collapse. They also determined that one of the mercenaries was responsible for the explosion, though he had no memory of how or why it happened, or even how he survived the explosion himself. Following a series of events that you'd have to see to believe, they ultimately determined that the perpetrator behind all of this was Jimmy, the drunk man from before. Jimmy is apprehended by the church, but with no real motivation and several outstanding questions, the group wasn't quite done with their search. The truth of the situation finally clicked when they realized that the only one who could have possibly guided the mercenary to the necessary point in the maze was the person who'd been mapping it out, Madame Lucretia. Her role in this made all of the missing pieces snap into place, prompting the group to search for her throughout the building, ultimately finding her in the maze itself, where she led them into a secret room she'd set up with Arsène Lupin. Over the course of breakfast, she explained that she's actually a dead apostle heir of Mara, meaning she's essentially the responsibilities placed on the dead apostle ancestor Mara expelled and given form so that the source dead apostle could do whatever she wants while someone else was tasked with the work. This means she exists to do the original job of protecting the world on behalf of Gaia, which she's decided would be best served by orchestrating and participating in an upcoming Holy Grail war. As an aside, she mentions that the druid who attacked the Ainsburns was the current human walking obligation of the dead apostle Ainnash, who is trying to avoid the Ainsburns getting involved in future Grail wars, given the Heavens Feel wish, and that Ainnash has apparently been through several such heirs over the years, who are grown fresh rather than benefiting from any long-term knowledge transfer or training. Lucretia explains that in the last Grail War, someone won and made a wish so big that it was beyond the Grail's ability to deliver, so the Grail continued to draw on the Leyline mana well past what it already had, and in doing so it's bleeding the world dry trying to fulfill that wish. With the cave containing the Grail itself missing, it seems impossible to reach it and deactivate it through normal means. The proposed solution is to copy the existing ritual, conduct a new Holy Grail War, and send a new wish from the Lesser Grail to the same Greater Grail of Fuyuki, which should overwrite the previous wish and give it something it can actually deliver with the gratuitous mana it's already collected. So long as the form is respected and the new wish is within scope, it should end the mana bleed before it's too late. Luvia Edelfelt, survivor of the Third Holy Grail War, is coordinating the new war, with Lucretia participating as one of the masters. Luvia has a contact who can move the site of the Holy Grail War so that it doesn't have to take place in Fuyuki, which probably can't support it in its current state. Since the incident of the previous war, there have been bubbles of mana appearing throughout the world, which among other things seem to provide a great deal of mana for their duration that could be tapped. They're going to try to set the Grail War in a location removed from civilians, where Holy Grail War can be conducted quickly and cleanly, ideally coinciding with these bubbles, or something similar to power it, given the short notice. After confirming the group's wishes coincide with a positive outcome for phantasmal species and elementals, Lucretia extends an invitation to Nora on behalf of the elves and druids of the world should they wish to send a representative. Lucretia wants to stack the 7-person war with 4 people who are sympathetic to the cause of not using the wish to harm phantasmal species or elementals, though she's concerned that if they stack things too heavily, a Grail failsafe will kick in and make things much harder for them. Over the course of breakfast, a few other noteworthy points come up. One of the items the group has won is the jawbone of a donkey used by Samson to defeat an army in biblical mythology. Lucretia also explains that she manipulated the events of Lupin's game to get the Chinese arrow, because she plans to use it as a master in the upcoming Grail War. She also explains that Jimmy is 1/8 of the Japanese legendary dragon Yamato no Orochi, who needs to stay drunk to live and will need to be rescued from the church before they leave with him. Lupin also mentions that while he beat Johnny in the fiddle contest, he got the impression that she was handicapped somehow as he's not that good. Following breakfast, the group recovers Jimmy and some of the items taken from him by the church in the last moments before the game resolves. The party guests who received coins are called up one by one to receive their prizes, with Ainnash and Penelope coming up last given they have the most coins. Lupin also reveals to the group that while he was retiring, there would be a Lupin VIII, and that he's chosen Catherine to be that successor based on her behavior and ambition at the party. Lupin, Catherine, and Crosby are seen driving off from the mansion in a sports car with a dinosaur skull attached at the top, alluding to an earlier mention by Crosby that he was working at this event to secure access to that skull for his druid daughter so that she could use their abilities together to let her speak with a dinosaur and hopefully learn enough about them to achieve a long-extinct wild shape in the modern world. After receiving their items, including a magic crest stolen from Clock Tower that served as the reason for Richard Wainwright's presence, they handed off the crest to him outside to honor the deal made during the event, and as a token of good faith to help him take a more nuanced view of phantasmal species. It seems he's making some progress on that front, as he's got the policies team looking into the Harvester's operation at the Chinese restaurant in support of finding the missing Goliath. The group decides to head back to the hotel and catch some long overdue rest before doubling back to the Chinese restaurant later to help with the investigation. Derek gives the now larger group a ride back to the hotel in his limousine. In addition to Ainnash, Penelope, and Jameson, the group now includes the tiefling Johnny, who vows to stay close to Penelope until she successfully wins her fiddle back and regains her warlock patron's favor. She reveals that she's in service to Von Fem, a dead apostle who has a strong grip on the entertainment industry, and that he won't restore her Magecraft abilities until she bests Penelope in a contest. After helping Johnny with her human disguise, the group heads down to the hotel bar to find Vivi, Penelope's halfling bard mentor, in the disguise of a blonde mage named Hither Saxcoat. The groups later compare notes on current and recent events, culminating in the reminder that Ainnash is invited to Sherwood for the upcoming summit, and Vivi offering to show the group around Clock Tower if they'd like to get a few opportunities to speak with people more experienced with Holy Grail wars of the past. Per a prior agreement with Richard, the group, now including Vivi, heads to the Chinese restaurant to find that most of the policies team has pulled out from the investigation following the return of the stolen magic crest. Richard opts to stick out the investigation in support of the Goliath Whisper Hex, whose husband went missing shortly before Lupin's party. Further investigation of the Chinese restaurant revealed a hidden passage to an underground railway apparently used by harvesters to transfer their wares and victims under the streets of Paris. After traversing a trap-filled tunnel, the group meet up with two more members of Whisper Hex's Goliath clan, Bike Wielder and Keg Tapper, who apparently found a similar tunnel under another Chinese restaurant in another part of town. The groups then converge on an underground train station where harvesters are loading up multiple trains with mystic codes and phantasmal species for transport to a dock city and delivery to parts unknown. The groups spring into action, again encountering the harvesters from the train, but this time the familiar faces either flee or are turned into a cow by Vivi's Magecraft before they can cause any harm. The remaining harvesters sound the alarm for the trains to escape before the group subdues them. Penelope successfully leverages her mystic eyes of suggestion to convince one of the harvesters to call off the evacuation order and release the phantasmal species trapped in one of the trains. Fortunately, the missing Goliath known as Doorbreaker was found alive on one of the trains. Unfortunately, the train was also transporting two trolls who escaped their bonds as part of the release order. Following a bit of fighting, the team subdues but does not execute the trolls, instead negotiating their surrender in exchange for safe transport to a safe place that doesn't involve trains. It turns out the trolls were actually from the reverse side of the world and were pulled to our side through a bubble portal similar to the ones Lucretia described. Their regenerative properties seem to make it possible for them to stay alive as reality ate away at them, but they'll only last so long on the mana available on this side of the world. The trolls feared they were going to be used as a perpetual food source and gladly took the offer of a ship ride to Einsburn Forest, where the trolls and ogres, who were also enslaved by the harvesters, could make something of a life for themselves on this side of the world. The Goliaths agreed to transport the phantasmal species back as far as Germany before moving on to their greater tribe in the Karelia region. On their final night in Paris, Penelope hosts a slumber party in the hotel room, and they all come up with clock tower identities and disguises for their upcoming trip to London. Anna elects to spend the night at Derek's suite, this time informing Penelope first, and convinces him to come to London with them rather than returning to the United States at this time. The following morning, the group decides to go shopping at the Mage Association's Paris hub and trade some of their accumulated mystic codes for items they find more useful. Jameson elects to travel back to Penelope's home in Oxford to get some more work done, and Derek's butler decides to take a very scenic trip to London, leaving the rest of the group free to teleport there with Vivi's teleportation circle Magecraft. Unfortunately, the group instead find themselves split up and scattered across an unusual mage's workshop, whose rooms are connected through portals, not hallways. Annis and Penelope end up in an unknown library where the books attack them, though they piece together from a journal in the library that the workshop belongs to one Jonas Ainsworth of Clocktower, whose areas of study include portals and object animation. Through trial and error and a bit of luck, the group finally come together, though Vivi fears they won't be able to teleport out of this strange place without great risk. The full party ultimately find themselves in an underground cave where a number of Magecraft circles and devices seem to be drawing power from a floating spherical portal to the reverse side of the world. With the stabilization portal only feet away, Penelope is able to contact Vivienne, the Lady of the Lake, even without the aid of the full moon. They compare notes of what they've learned since their last meeting, including what Lucretia shared with them at the Lupin party, and also news of how things seem to be degrading further with trolls actually passing through a portal and surviving. Vivienne lures a plant creature into the portal, which does seem stable enough for it to reach our side of the world, though the bounded field surrounding the portal seems to cause it great pain that is only made worse by the shallow mana effectively suffocating it on this side of the world. The group successfully push it back through the portal before it expires, at which point Vivienne sets up a perimeter on the other side to keep creatures from wandering through. The party then explore the workshop a bit more, ultimately meeting Jonas Ainsworth and learning that his workshop is indeed researching ways to harness these strange bubbles as both a power source and a bridge to the long inaccessible reverse side of the world. There's a bit of tense confrontation between the two groups, though Jonas ultimately offers to teleport the party to Clocktower per their original goal, and the group takes him up on it, along with a follow-up invitation to actually meet up with him at the Department of Spiritual Evocation for more discussion under better circumstances, finally leaving his strange portal workshop and appearing in London. The London arc kicks off with the party passing through the mage equivalent of TSA, with each person sharing their fake identity before clearing the screening and moving on. Vivi sets off to make arrangements for the group's visit to Clocktower, while Annis takes the party to her grandpap's potion shop, where they meet her elven cousins Buck and Beach. It turns out Buck, who is far more integrated with mage society as a scout of sorts, is a fan of Penelope, and in fact knows of an underground movement inspired by her that draws in students disaffected with the traditional views of the mage families and Clock Tower itself. Beach, by contrast, seems to be a more stabilizing element within Grimm's hideaway community of phantasmal species within London. Following an evening of catching up with family and another slumber party, the group turns in for the night. Annis's uncle Heath, who was absent the day of Annis's return, finally comes in the following morning with news that Clock Tower is going to be sending operatives into the neighborhood to suss out reports of monster sightings that likely resulted from another reverse side of the world bubble appearing in a local furbolg named Fletcher's basement. Buck and Beach are sent door to door to remind people to stay calm and not escalate already existing tension between the phantasmal species community and the Clock Tower mages. The party of Annis, Penelope, Johnny, and Derek examine the portal, confirming its similarity to the one in the Ainsworth workshop, though this one seems to connect to a different area within the reverse side of the world. In a bit of unfortunate timing, a small army of rat soldiers led by a rat king exit the portal just as the Association mages begin their sweep of the neighborhood. Identifying the rats as the ones from the famous Christmas play, the group successfully forces the Rat King back through the portal by playing along with the dance choreography from the play itself. Once the Rat King was returned, his troops fall back and Vivienne has her troops clear the area and set up a perimeter on the reverse side of the world. As the Lady of the Lake holds less control in this region, she's concerned that the risk of further incursions is much greater than with the original portal, so following the departure of the Association, Derek volunteers to alternate shift with Annis's cousins to keep an eye on the portal until they can find a solution. Following the Rat King incident, Annis spends the day restocking on potions while Johnny and Penelope use the downtime to discuss matters of warlock patrons and the potential Holy Grail War brewing in the future. The following morning, Annis, Penelope, and Johnny make contact with Crosby and gain access to the Department of Spiritual Evocation, which in this setting is located beneath the Royal Theatre of London at Drury Lane. Following a quick tour of the facilities, the group meets up with Jonas Ainsworth again, and get more information on his research, how he's trying to set up proper bounded fields to keep creatures out of the portals, and what he thinks the problems involving portals around the world entail. He provides them with a ritual scroll that might make it harder for creatures to pass through, though he does note that it's a lost cause if it can't be performed on both sides of the sphere. Following this meeting, Hemlock chases a rogue spirit through the hallway, ultimately leading the group to a student who summoned a large and murderous spirit by mistake. After a bit of a violent scuffle, Penelope manages to convince the spirit of a long-deceased actor to return to the stage for a final encore performance, effectively granting it the closure it needed and helping it pass on and return to the route. This stunt is observed by Rocco Belfabon, the head of the Department of Summoning, who invites the group to visit his office to discuss the finer points of summoning at some point in the future should they like to learn more about how these things work, which the group agrees to consider as they may yet find themselves dealing with heroic spirits in a Grail War. The encounter with the ghost left Penelope physically drained, but following a quick lunch, the group decided to go check out the botany department at the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew Gardens, as they find some time to kill before they're due to meet up with Vivi and catch an open lesson from the 4th Holy Grail War survivor at the Department of Modern Magecraft. On their way to the garden, the group notices a suspicious horse wandering around London. Deciding to pursue, they follow it all the way back to Grimm's hideaway and catch it looking into the window of Annis's grandfather's potion shop. A bit of pursuit and cornering later, they discover that the horse is actually a centaur named Aiden in disguise. Aiden comes from Sherwood Forest, though Annis has never met him before, as he's from a more remote region within the forest, and it seems he was taken in by an especially reclusive druid. Aiden has come to London to learn more about healing methods, having met Annis's grandfather and taken an interest in the potential of Greenleaf Potions. He also wants to learn more about what Clock Tower is up to, so following some discussion, he puts his horse disguise back on and joins the group at the Kew Gardens. After exploring the gardens for a bit with Annis in Wild Shape of a Horse as well, Penelope and Johnny meet the gossipy botany mage Mint Honeyblossom. Mint explains that Clock Tower has been on alert lately, and that the demand for potions has risen, showing a crossbreed of herbs that are currently being used to develop faster but ultimately inferior healing potions. Mint also lets slip that as a result of the weakening ley lines, the gardens would benefit greatly if a ley line passing through the Phantasmal Species neighborhood, where Annis's shop is, were redirected, and surmises that it's quite likely the current crackdowns from Clock Tower were a pretense to drive out the Phantasmal Species and redirect their mana resources to Clock Tower proper. The discussion is cut a bit short when Aiden and horse form Ainnash steal or eat some of the rare potion flowers, prompting Mint to ask them to leave the gardens. Seeking a private place to discuss what they learned, the group find an isolated greenhouse atop a hill where no people or mages seem to wander. There's a bounded field in place, prompting a bit of investigation and ultimately Aiden sneaking into the building and letting others in to look around. The greenhouse is home to a large number of blights similar to the ones Ainnash and Penelope encountered in Germany. The blights also claim that the druid they serve has been missing for quite some time, which a quick text to Vivi confirms to be the case, as the greenhouse belongs to one Irvine Gilrath. Irvine himself is a bit of an outcast in Druid society, as he traded druidic secrets with the Association for resources and leeway to perform his own research undisturbed. Vivi met him on occasion when the archaeology department needed the assistance of a botany mage, though the guy seemed to otherwise keep to himself and his mushrooms. The largely abandoned blights continue to take care of themselves in isolation, with many of them dying out in absence of the druid, but the party assisted them with their seedlings and vowed to help them get to a safer environment. The blights thank them, and acknowledging Ainnash as a druid worthy of druid secrets, directs her to a hidden compartment in a nearby table containing a few very high-level spell scrolls for druidic magecraft. Once the group departed the greenhouse, they went to the archaeology department at Rocks Road, though in practice they actually ran into Vivi in her Hither Sax code identity along the way, and detoured back to their original destination of the Department of Modern Magecraft for an early special orientation from one Lord El-Melloi II. Somehow ignoring the apparent horse in the classroom, Lord El-Melloi II gives an introduction to modern magecraft to a room full of current and prospective students. During this lecture, he shows the class a branch from a cherry blossom tree taken from Fuyuki City. The branch is nearly transparent and would likely fall apart to the touch, not unlike the drained plants from back in the Einsburn forest before the ley lines were corrected and the Child of Ainnash destroyed. After telling a story about a mage woman who could leverage electricity as a source of mana, Lord El-Melloi II instructed the group in attendance to socialize and make allies, as networking is critical for survival in the mage world. During the social exchange, a hooded girl named Gray identifies Hemlock as a Nasoi and takes effort to avoid showing her face after Hemlock comments, psychically, that her face looks familiar. Lord El-Melloi II likewise enters a discussion with the party, touching in part on the challenges facing mage lineages as the world has less and less mana to go around. El-Melloi II brings the class to a close, asking the party to stay behind. Once Gray closes the classroom door and sets a bounded field to maintain privacy, Lord El-Melloi II calls out the phantasmal species present for what they really are, and the true conversation about why they're here and what they're looking for begins. So that catches you up with where we are as of the end of the 41st session. We try to play once a week. If you'd like to keep up with what we're doing in the future, go to twitch.tv/playfulmimic. Feel free to subscribe there. We do not have a 100% set schedule as we're working around the players. However, if you subscribe, you'll be notified when we play. Likewise, after every session, we post the videos here on YouTube. I hope you've enjoyed this recap. I hope you find it interesting, at least as a what-if take on the world of Type Moon. We obviously pull elements from various different pieces of Type Moon with our own twist on things. We will not perfectly match the canon of any one setting, though we will probably stray the closest to the backbone set by Fate Zero. And beyond that, I would like to offer the obligatory, we don't own Type Moon, we don't own Fate, we don't own any of these official characters, nor do we have any intellectual property invested in anything that we've taken from there. This is a parody run by friends for us and our entertainment. I hope you're enjoying it, but please, if you find this interesting and you're not familiar with it, go check out Fate Zero, go check out Fate Stay Night, go pump an unhealthy amount of money into Fate Grand Order, go support actual Type Moon properties, because without them, this entire game would not be possible, and it's honestly a very fun and satisfying franchise to get into should you actually take the plunge. So, again, thank you for listening to this recap. I hope you found something helpful. By all means, throw comments on YouTube if you would like to let us know. We are doing this for ourselves. We're not planning on getting sponsorship or anything, so don't subscribe if you don't want to, but by all means do if you'd like to see what we're doing. All right, thank you very much.